Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Witch Doctor. So, Witch Doctor is a 5-position hero, pretty much only a 5-position hero, and as such, how do we think about him? Well, he's actually a pretty aggressive, strong laner in that he has a spell, and we'll take a look at that obviously in a second, called Maledict, which is really good at being aggressive and zoning people out in lane. So he can be a pretty aggressive laner. Now, he's not like the best laner or anything. He doesn't do like a ton of damage himself. He doesn't have the best stun in the world, but he is one of these heroes that he can like permanently lock you down if he gets you into the right position. He can have a stun that goes off in a team fight that just owns and wins the team fight. He has a damage spell with that Maledict and with his ult that can just own team fights and do a ton of damage in team fights, so he can be a big team fighter. But he also has this kind of odd arbitrary heal spell that can actually do a good amount of sustain, not only in lane but also later in the game. He can help your team push in general against a lot of D-push, a lot of sustained damage over time kind of stuff like a sniper shrapnel or other things like that. He has good sustain in team fights and in pushing, so he doesn't push towers directly, but he sustains your team and he can do a ton of good team fight damage. And so that's pretty much how to think about Witch Doctor. I think he's a really good hero for newer players to play because he can own games, he can win games, but you have to coordinate with your team. You also have to be kind of careful and know when to cast your spells and when are the best times to cast your spells, because, you know, if you get your spells interrupted because he has channeling spells or you don't cast them correctly or you miss them, you can pretty much feel worthless. You're also pretty slow, you're very squishy, you're not very survivable, all of those kinds of things. So he's a very good support to learn all of the basics of support with. So that's how to think about Witch Doctor. Now let's jump in and look at his abilities. So now that we understand Witch Doctor in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that 5-position support that can do actually a lot of damage and be a pretty aggressive laner like I talked about. So first we're going to take a look at Paralyzing Cask. So it's pretty straightforward. You actually just click it on an enemy, and it shoots out a stun, but the stun actually bounces back and forth between enemies in the range. So you see there's the cast range, but the range for bouncing is kind of around this long. Like here, we'll show you here. I'll cast it again, and it does bounce that far, but put Axe a little bit further away, and it's not going to bounce back. So it's about this far. You just have to get used to how far the range is for that. But basically, it'll bounce back and forth. So if I go over here, I'll cast it on the creeps here in a second. And we'll see that it's just kind of arbitrary where it bounces. So it'll just bounce around, you know, any of the creeps back and forth between those. It'll secure a last hit for me. It'll damage the creeps. So it's a good way to actually push lanes out, but it's a really good way to lock down enemies that you're going on, especially if you have two enemies that are right close to each other and, you know, there's no one else around there. Or if there's one creep left in the lane and the enemy is walking near it, you can just cast your Paralyzing Cask. It'll just bounce back and forth between them, and it almost perma-stuns them. You see, the stun lasts for a little while, so it can be very annoying and hard to get away from it, especially if you're close like this. It'll just basically bounce back and forth and permanently stun both heroes for a little while. And it's pretty annoying. It can be a pretty good stun. But obviously, it's not super reliable. It's not a hex or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. It is kind of like a skill cast ability. You have to know when to cast it, and it can be a little bit luck-based as well. So the next thing is Voodoo Restoration. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You just click it, and in an AoE, you see the AoE there. Witch Doctor heals everything in that AoE. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. There's a certain basically HP per second that it heals, and it also drains your mana per second. So you see here, I have it on, and my mana is just slowly going down. I turn it off, and my mana was, you know, not going down anymore. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And as you get more items, as you get more levels, those kinds of things, you can pretty much sustain a good amount of healing. You can do a good amount of healing with this hero with this Voodoo Restoration. It's kind of one of the underrated spells of this hero, but it can do a lot. It can even do a lot with 1 point in lane. So I've seen it turn around ganks and things like that in a lane as well. Next is Maledict. So Maledict is an AoE spell. You see here's the AoE. It has an okay range, but not a great range. And you can basically cast it in an area, and it affects every enemy in that area. And so what happens is, you see right now, it's not really doing much. Like, they kind of take damage, but they're really not taking that much damage. Well, what happens is, as it wears off here, I'll show you it in a better way, is that if we give, let's just say we give this guy a Divine Rapier. Let's say I get 2 Divine Rapiers, right? Let's see how my right-click damage is. Okay, that's a lot of right-click damage. Maybe I only want 1 Divine Rapier here. But basically what happens is, this spell lasts for a certain amount of time, and it ticks down. Every tick does damage, so there's a certain amount of ticks, And it's kind of complicated in this way, but every tick does damage based on the amount of health that the enemy lost since that last tick or during the entirety of Maledict. So basically, watch this. I cast this. I will click Axe a couple times and then watch the tick. See how the tick does more damage? Because not only is it doing a little bit of damage, but it's actually doing more damage to him now because he's taken more damage over time. So it's almost like a kind of, I guess you could say, like a Venomancer spell where it does a ton of magical damage over time. Like, the more damage that you're doing on an enemy, the more they will take damage later. And it's just very, very powerful. And you see, it can't be dispelled. So it's not like a Slark or a BKB or anything like that. Obviously, it doesn't pierce BKB, but it's not like anything can really dispel it. It's not like you can get it off of you. If you don't have a BKB or you don't have some way to be like, to go back to Fountain or do something or not take damage, be invulnerable to this kind of magical damage, you are pretty much going to die to this, especially early on. It can be very, very powerful in lane. So that's how you can see that, you get this cast on you in lane, you get Maledict on you in lane, and you take some damage from the carry, you even take some damage from the Paralyzing Cask, you take some damage from the right clicks of Witch Doctor, and you can die very, very quickly with this. It's actually one of the best spells that he has. Now, lastly, we have the Death Ward. This is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You cast it down in an area, and basically a ward comes up, and it does a ton of damage over time while you channel it. So keep in mind, you are channeling it the entire time for the duration, and if you get stunned, if, you cancel it, you press stop, you move, or whatever it is with this hero, it will cancel your ult. So you have to keep that in mind. It's like Bane ult or something else like that where it does have a channel time, and if you get interrupted, it can just be kind of useless. So it is very important that this hero can have a lot of bad matchups. If there's a lot of long distance stuns, a lot of things that can interrupt the hero, it can feel really, really bad. So that's why you also have to keep in mind that you need to know when to cast a Death Ward. So you see that the enemy, they casted all their stuns on the enemy or on your allies, then you can put down the Death Ward. The other thing is, obviously, the combo would be to Paralyzing Cask, use your E, then you Death Ward. And so you don't even have to do it that long. They can run away, and you're going to kill somebody. It's very, very good for that. So that's why this hero can be super effective in team fight. Let's say you get a Cask off on two heroes that are right next to each other. They're perma-stunned. You get the Maledict on them. They're probably going to die in the fight, and then you get your Death Ward out. It can just be insane amounts of damage. There's almost no hero in the game that can survive this kind of combo, especially at the early points in the game. Later on in the game, it can be a little bit less effective because this is physical damage. Keep that in mind. It's not magical damage. So it can miss, and it's physical. It has to do with armor. So this ultimate can fall off later, but it can be very, very effective, especially early on. You can do a ton of damage. So that's pretty much Witch Doctor. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You can also buy Ags on this hero. Just gives the ultimate a little bit more damage there. You get True Strike, and they can bounce around, so it just does more damage. But the other more important thing, I think, would be the Agnum's Shard. And this is important because basically it allows you to have a second Death Ward, and it gives you some survivability. You can just click it, and for a short duration, you actually turn into a Death Ward. You can't be stunned. You're basically invulnerable. You don't take damage. It's just a good way to be survivable, but also dish out a little bit of extra damage if your Death Ward gets canceled or you don't want to commit it or whatever. So it is a good thing to know for this hero. I think this shard is a must-buy on this hero eventually once you get the money, even though obviously you're a 5 position, you don't have a ton of money. Now, the last thing I will say is that this item, Glimmer Cape, is extremely important on the hero because of the channeling ability. You can actually use this on yourself while you are channeling your ultimate. So it's not something that you have to use ahead of time. You can actually use it while you're channeling to make it harder for people to stun you, to kill you, to see you, to stop you from ulting. So just keep that in mind. It's something that's very important. It's a core part of the hero. So that's Witch Doctor. Those are his abilities. And now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. So now we're jumping into a game here of Dubu playing Witch Doctor, and I wanted to just say at the rune, it is kind of important to make sure you're trying to contest runes with this hero because he can be very strong. With his Paralyzing Cask level 1, obviously if you get two heroes like this, close together, you can really stun them really, really good, like we're just seeing here. I mean, this is a great stun. It's really effective against them. Obviously, Luna's not the best, so kind of Luna takes a lot of damage, and they have some pretty tanky, good heroes there. But it's really important to, I think, contest the rune because you can be very aggressive with this hero. You can also choose to get level 1 Maledict. I think always you want to get almost every game. Paralyzing cast level 1 or 2, and then Maledict the other level. But Maledict level 1 can be really good if you have a carry like a Wraith King, you have some other kind of carry that has a stun, has a slow, has some way where you can pretty much secure the Maledict cast, and then you can do a ton of damage to the enemy offlaner or the enemy, forward position, whatever it is. But it's very, very important to make sure you're skilling the right skill in that way. I think the stun is always going to be pretty decent, but it's just a matter of, which one you think is best for that lane, and something that you're going to learn from playing Witch Doctor. Now, you can kind of see that as they're laning here, the Spearbreaker here is actually taking the wave away, and that's because they know with the ranged Luna, it's going to be hard to lane just straight up against the ranged Luna, and once Dubu here hits level 2 on this Witch Doctor, this is going to be a kill lane, because there's 2 melees, right, and it's going to be very, very hard once they hit level 2 to honestly deal with this Maledict. It can be a ton of damage. You obviously have the nukes coming out, the extra damage from Lunar Blessing, and then you have the potential level 2 Lucent Beam. It can just be a lot of damage. It's going to be a very effective kill lane in this way. But in general, that's what we're going to see happen. They're going to try to make the lane pretty messy because happens right here, we see how effective this can be. He just has to TP out right away, and he still doesn't even get it. That's exactly why he was doing that, because he knew at level 2 he was going to have the chance of dying. So as Witch Doctor, that's what you need to do. You need to take advantage of your level 2 timing. Sometimes I say, as a 5 position, let your carry get some XP. I would say, obviously, eventually you want that to happen, but you need to get your level 2 timing as soon as possible. Take XP with your carry until you get level 2. You don't want to be sitting at level 1 forever. Take that XP, be in the lane, harass, all those kinds of things, because it's just so good. Level 2 on this hero is just so good. It makes it so much more powerful. And you see how much they have to be scared. They just have to run away from this Witch Doctor every time that Maledict is up. Now he doesn't have a ton of resources left. The Maledict is wearing off, and now he has to be a little bit less aggressive. But that's pretty much how you want to think about Witch Doctor. And then from there, honestly, the lane is straightforward. This is a simple, typical 5-position hero. Maybe you'll get a point in heal. Let's say you need to heal your... you have a Spectre, or you have a Slark or something, or whatever, some hero that you want to heal a lot. Obviously, you can buy your salves, but the other thing you can do is you can put at least a level in your heal. It can definitely do a lot. If you think that you're not going to get very aggressive, if you don't have a good kill lane, you can just get a point, maybe even 2 points in your heal, and just sustain through the lane. If you have a carry that doesn't really love to get aggressive, then you can do that as well. So there are some ways to mix up the build with Witch Doctor, but otherwise, for the most part, you're going to look to get aggressive, use your cask, use your Maledict to do a ton of damage, and if you really have a good kill lane, you can put a lot of points in your Maledict, like he does here. He has 2 points in the Maledict, and he knows that as soon as the Maledict is up, like, any damage that this guy takes, he's just going to straight up die. Like, I think he might even die. Let's just see what happens. Does he actually straight up die from this? It's a level 2. Yep, he straight up dies. He was probably going to die anyway, but he got him there. We eventually found him in the trees. But you can just see how powerful Maledict can be. And otherwise, then, he's pulling. He's doing what he can with his carry, trying to sustain his carry, giving his carry levels now that he's level 3, all of that kind of stuff. Typical 5-position support things just for the 5-position role, but that's how you want to be thinking about Witch Doctor in the early portion of the game in the laning stage. Now, the next thing I want to show you is we skipped to 10 minutes here, and he just got level 6. Now, they're pushing out the mid-wave, him and the Rubik here, but I kind of I'll speed it up a little bit, but you see that as soon as he gets 6, as soon as they have an opportunity, they're going to look to gank, because this hero is very, very good at ganking, obviously, with this Death Ward. Once you get the Death Ward, you actually do some of the most damage possible in the game, especially for a 5-position support. There's very few supports that can do as much damage as you can with this skill build here, the Maledict level 3 and this ultimate. You do so much damage. So they look to go mid, they stun, he uses his Maledict and then instantly casts it, and look at how much damage the Void takes. Now obviously there was a little bit of help there from the enemies, but that was honestly mainly Witch Doctor. And even if the Void Spirit got away there a little bit, like, used both of his abilities, got away, he probably still would have died to the ticks of Maledict, because it was on there for a while. He probably would have died. He would have taken a ton of damage. It's now maxed out. This hero can be so strong. This is your timing right now. Once you hit 6, from that 6, timing, around 10 minutes, whenever it is that you get that, to about, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, before people get BKB, before people get Manta, before people get the items that allow them to, escape, he can be so powerful. He can do some of them, like I said, one of the highest damage 5 positions in the game at this point in the game. So I think it's very, very important. Don't just look to be super passive or sit behind. Look to be a little bit more aggressive with this hero once you hit level 6, once you have your ultimate up. Play almost like a core in the sense that once you have your ultimate up, you want to look to get aggressive and help out your team. It's just something that you can really do a lot early game. You're not using this hero to the full efficiency that you can if you're looking to get involved with your Maledict and with your ult and all of that kind of stuff once you hit 6. So that's pretty much how to think about Witch Doctor and how to play him at this portion of the game. And again, look at this. A great way to defend towers. Very, very good at defending towers. He pretty much just puts the Death Ward down and says, you guys can't come here. Uses Maledict on 2 heroes. Does a ton of damage. It's just a really, really good example of how to use this hero and how you can be aggressive and fight with your team. I think it's a really, really great example there. And Dubu plays this hero kind of flawlessly right here in this replay. So anyway, that's how to think about Witch Doctor in the mid portion of the game once you hit 6. Next is just a small clip, but in the beginning of the clip, I wanted to show you that Husky right here is spamming Witch Doctor is missing. He spammed it a couple times because Witch Doctor is actually a fairly good hero at ganking. So at this point in the game, he has, almost a maxed out stun, maxed out Maledict. He has Death Ward available. The enemy has to be afraid of where this Witch Doctor is, because if the Witch Doctor comes out of nowhere, gets a stun off, gets a Maledict off, that can pretty much mean you're going to die. At this point in the game, like I said before, you're going to die. He's going to do so much damage. So we see here, this is him being involved in ganks. This hero is really, really good at assisting in ganks. Now, potentially, if the lineup is correct and the matchup is right, you can use this hero to almost like solo kill people. It's kind of crazy how much damage you can do. But honestly, if you just get +1 with your mid, if you follow your mid around and gank with your mid, this hero is just so strong ganking. And so we see a good example of that. They take out the carry and the mid there on the back of the Storm and him and the other support. They didn't even need the Legion duel to get that first kill on the Void. It was just very, very effective, and largely due to the Witch Doctor and that paralyzing cask and the Maledict and all that damage. So that's another great example of how to gank with Witch Doctor in the mid game. Now, the last thing I want to show you, this game is pretty much a stomp. They're absolutely destroying it, but I did want to show you kind of how to think about team fighting with this hero. You want to stay in the back. You don't want to get gone on, because if you don't get your spells off, you're pretty much useless. So you see how he stays behind the rest of his heroes, the rest of his allies, and he casts his cask. He then casts Maledict, and then he basically casts his ult, and he gets a full channel duration ultimate because they pretty much waste everything or use everything on everyone else in the, on his team, and he's able to pretty much survive through it, cast everything, and get a ton of damage out because of that. He doesn't even fully have his Glimmer Cape yet. He didn't have it at the time, but if he did, it would be even better. So I think it's just a good example. Obviously, they are stomping. His allies are doing pretty well. The Luna's destroying and still has Aegis, didn't even die in that fight. But that's a pretty good example of how to use Witch Doctor, and I think that's a good example of how to play Witch Doctor in general. Be aggressive in the laning stage, look to get aggressive when you have your ult up. You can really be a good +1 to ganks with this hero. And then obviously, in team fights, look to stay back. Don't get gone on. Don't get killed early on. You're not really an initiator. You're more like a team fighter. Once all the spells have been cast and people are really in the chaos, then you can get all of your stuff off and you can do a ton of damage. So that's pretty much how to play Witch Doctor. I hope you guys enjoyed that guide. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all those kinds of things. All the links are below in the description for Discord, for the Patreon, and for my Twitch. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next video.